Welcome to week 4 lecture. Today we will talk about FBA again. We will review a little bit and then we'll talk about BIP, Behavior Intervention Plan, and then we'll talk about how to graph your intervention data for your final project. And then I'll introduce step 2, your practicum report. So we'll introduce the documents you need to complete for this assignment. Let's review the process of FBA and BIP. So you need to gather information about the challenging behaviors. So you can do interview, or you can use rating scale, or you can do ABC analysis, or scatter plot. And then you will come up with summary statements. It's called hypothesis, right? So you will come up with a hypothesis, and then you have to test to see if your hypothesis is true. And then those information will be linked to the intervention plan. It's called BIP. So that's the things we are going to talk about today. So the last step of FBA is to develop BIP, Behavioral Intervention Plan. So you will link the FBA information to develop BIP. So each BIP must include setting events, antecedents, problem behavior, and consequence information. The BIP, Behavioral Intervention Plan, is also known as Behavior Support Plan. So let's see the path. So when you develop BIP, Behavioral Intervention Plan, this form is the first thing you need to fill out. So the upper part is called competing pathways. From your FBA, you will be able to fill out setting events, antecedents, problem behavior, and maintaining consequences, the contingencies. Desired behavior, very top part, is what's supposed to be happen. For example, when a teacher provides worksheet, the students is supposed to work on the worksheet, right? That's the desired behavior. And that's what we want to see from the students. And the maintaining consequence would be teachers' praise, or getting free time after the worksheet, or getting additional work. So those are very natural consequences after desired behavior. Acceptable alternative behavior is called functionally equivalent behavior, because this alternative acceptable behavior should cause the same consequences as the problem behavior. Let's say the problem behavior is screaming, and the function of the behavior is to escape the task worksheet. Then the acceptable behavior could be verbally asking for a break, or showing the communication card saying I need a break. If problem behavior is refusing to work and talking out to get teacher's attention, then acceptable alternative behavior could be asking for teacher's help, or asking feedback. These alternative behavior also bring the same consequences and have the same function, which is to get teachers' attention, right? So based on this information, you can develop this BIP. That's what we are going to do for this week and the next week. Now, from your BIP, we are going to focus on alternative acceptable behavior first. So we are going to teach those behaviors. Remember, your intervention must match the function of problem behavior. Means if problem behavior is to escape something, then the intervention and the behavior you're teaching should provide the same function. So the students should be able to escape from the situation. This is an example of Erica. So from BIP, this teacher come up with this summary statement. So this summary statement includes setting events, antecedents, behavior, and consequences. And also this teacher includes the function of behavior as well. So this is a pathway for Erica. From your reading, we have learned that we want to make problem behavior irrelevant, ineffective, and inefficient. We can do that by manipulating setting events, antecedents, or consequence. Or you can actually teach the alternate behavior first and then eventually desired behavior. So this is a whole BIP. So after you complete FBA and then pathway, you will develop BIP, the intervention plan, the bottom part, the bottom 4 columns. So to fill out these intervention plan, well, if you know many teaching strategy, it will be much easier for you to develop the plan, right? And there are so many intervention strategy identified already, like social story intervention, priming, prompting, reinforcement, such things. And for example, if for example, priming and prompting, those type of intervention can be used as antecedent intervention because you intervene before the problem behavior occurs. So that can be considered as antecedent-based intervention. However, you can just simply alter and change the setting events and antecedents. Please, let's take a look at this Erica's behavior. So, Erica's setting events is no peer contact in past 30 minutes. And then the setting events intervention strategy identified by this teacher is very simple. She will just reschedule independent work time after lunch or recess instead of just before lunch and recess. So the teacher wants to satisfy and provide enough peer contact. So she wants to prevent the problem behavior from occurring. So that can be a simple setting event intervention. Before we move on, let's practice. Let's fill out the pathway, the upper part for any. So this is example hypothesis for any. So you will see setting events, antecedents, behavior, and function. So using this information, please fill out the upper part of the BIP, the pathway, and you can also identify the desired behavior and alternate behavior. You can come up with your own. And please upload your response to Blackboard. Again, using Annie's information in the previous slide, you will fill out this form. The practice form is attached online, so you can download it. Open the file and you will see this form. Using Annie's information, you will fill out this pathway, setting events, antecedent, problem, behavior, consequence, and function. Also, you have to identify the desired behavior and the consequence, and alternative behavior as well. And once you're done, you can upload your answer to Blackboard. Now let's talk about the intervention strategies to fill out the bottom part of BIP. I want to give you an example first, so you can take a look at what interventions are available for setting events, antecedents, behavior teaching, and consequences. So here's the first example. So if the problem behavior maintained to gain something, to gain tangible things like preferred item or activity, the possible antecedent strategy is social story intervention. So you can read the story so you can prevent the problem behavior from occurring, and you can direct teach appropriate behavior. So you can use communication cards, so you will teach um, appropriate behavior. And the consequence strategy might be extinction, so challenging behavior will be ignored but appropriate behavior will be praised. So this is the second example. um, if the problem behavior maintained to gain someone's attention, setting events strategy or antecedent strategy can be satiation. So you provide enough attention before the problematic routine start. Or you can directly teach um, the alternate or desired behavior while problem behavior ignored. And consequence strategy, maybe you can use systematic reinforcement schedule. We'll talk about this schedule later. So that can be another example. If the problem behavior maintained to gain something, then for antecedent strategy you can provide let of choices of preferred item, or you can directly teach using some direct teaching strategy like communication card or priming something. And then consequence strategy can be positive reinforcement, such things. So this is the last example. If the problem behavior maintained automatically, which means the function of challenging behavior is self-stimulation, then you can use the satiation as an antecedent strategy. So the child can play um, with something, or a child is allowed to engage in self stimulatory behavior like hand clapping for 10 minutes before a problematic routine starts. So student can be satiated before the child's doing something. um, and you can directly teach the appropriate behavior using whatever strategy you have while the challenging behavior is ignored. You can also use differential reinforcement as consequence strategy. So when the child does not exhibit the hand clapping behavior, the self stimulatory behavior for 1 minute, the child will receive a token. So using token economy, and you can gradually increase the the time. So first 1 minute, the next time 1 minute and 30 seconds, 1 minute and 30 seconds. You can gradually increase the time to get the token. So that's differential reinforcement. This is an example. You can refer to it when you developed your own BIP for your own student, but these are not the absolute example. You can develop your own based on the situation and context, your needs. You have your. Now I want to introduce the step 2 assignment for you. This is screening form. The form is available online on Blackboard. As you can tell, we are in the very beginning stage. So after you get to know about your students and the behavior, we are going to use this screening form. This is informal. After you have some observations, you will fill out the form. So there will be no correct, incorrect answers for the form. This is just screening form. So based on your observation and knowledge about your students and behavior, you will fill out the screening. So the form is available online, and we are in the very beginning stage for FBA. So now let's talk about how to graph your data after you deliver intervention. One intervention or two interventions from your BIP, you want to see if the behavior decrease or increase with the intervention, right? To see the effectiveness of intervention you choose, we have to graph your data. I believe you have learned about single case research design from SPED 514. So I will just briefly review the research design and then we'll talk about how to graph the data. Well, research design guide researcher and teachers to collect data. For example, if you use group design, you want to see the difference between treatment groups and control group through the treatment. You deliver interventions to the treatment group and you're not going to deliver the intervention to control group and you want to see the difference, right? When we use single subject design or called single case research design, we want to see the behavior change of each individual before and after intervention. So you want to focus one or few individuals rather than group, and you want to see the effectiveness of one intervention or more intervention within each. So this is a methodological term. Single case research design requires functional relation. Independent variable is always intervention, and dependent variable is always target behavior. So for your final project, the target behavior must be the alternative acceptable behavior, right? Functional relation is established when you see a consistent effect on a dependent variable, which is your target behavior, by systematically manipulating on intervention, like independent variable. So when you introduce if intervention, if the behavior goes up or down, and that means an experimental control is observed. If you see more than 3 experimental control, then we say functional relation is established. So for example, so this is an example of ABAB design. A phase is always baseline, B phase is always intervention. So AB, you see baseline, intervention, and baseline intervention phase in this graph, right? So this researcher used positive attention as her intervention strategy, and the dependent variable was social interaction. In the initial baseline phase, this researcher has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 baseline data, and then she introduced the intervention, which is positive attention, and had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 intervention sessions. Do you see the behavior change with intervention? Yes, right? As she introduced the intervention, the dependent variable, the frequency of social interaction increased, right? And then she went back to baseline data phase and had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 baseline session again. When she withdrew the intervention, the behavior decreased, right? And then when she reintroduced the intervention, the behavior gradually increased. So you see there are 3 different points that behavior change with the intervention by withdrawal the intervention, right? So there are 3 points of behavior change by the use of intervention, and we say that's the experimental control, and we see there are 3 experimental control or experimental effects. So we said there is functional relation established with this intervention. Single case research design include these specific research design, AB design, that's for teacher, right? Easy. ABAB, that's the thing we just saw, and changing criteria, multiple baseline, and alternative treatment. But for our final project, we are going to use an A-B design. A is baseline phase, B is intervention phase. So we are going to have only one baseline phase and one intervention phase. For baseline, you need to have at least 3 stable baseline points. That means you need to have at least 3 baseline sessions. So when you move to intervention, you can kind of compare. Behavior change before the intervention and after intervention. So intervention, whatever intervention you're using, it's called B phase. So by introducing the intervention, you'll be able to see behavior change, or you may not. Depends on the intervention you're using. B phase is always intervention. A phase is always baseline. But if you are using the second intervention strategy, it will be called C phases. So AB design is a basic single subject design, only has 2 phases, A and B. When you have stable baseline established, you can move on to intervention session and you will provide more than 6 intervention sessions. It's very simple. However, methodologically, you cannot achieve establish functional relation because you're not going back to baseline and you don't reintroduce intervention. You don't replicate those phases, right? So you cannot establish functional relation, but it's simple. You can use this in design at school. It's convenient. So this is an example of an A-B design. As you see, there are 5 baseline sessions and 5 intervention sessions. After this researcher established stable baseline, she moved on to intervention session. And the dependent variable was correct response on reading assignment. So you will you will implement your intervention in this way using A/B design, and you will record your data and you will graph your data. That will be your final project. So when you interpret your graph, you need to consider 3 things: level, trend, variability. So level is the mean of data within a condition. So you will get the mean of baseline and you will get the mean of intervention and you can compare. Trend is a slope or patterns of change over time. So you can say positive trends, negative trends, or flat trends. So you will analyze the trends within a condition. So baseline condition and intervention phase condition. Variability is a degree to which the data is dispersed from the mean or slope during a phase. So you will see how much the data is fluctuating within a condition, within a baseline, within an intervention phase. So here's several example graphs. You are going to use the terms of level, trends, and variability to interpret a graph. So for example, let's take a look at the very first graph. There is obvious change in level. The baseline mean is really low compared to intervention phase, and the trend is flat in baseline and also flat in intervention. And there is very low variability in each phases. So we can tell the intervention was really effective, right? So you will use those terms level, trend, variability to determine and to interpret your graph and effects of the intervention you want to use. When we use a single case research design, we are going to visualize our data. We are going to graph data always, so we can easily compare the behavior change with the intervention. So here's an example. So in a graph, you must include several elements. You must have x-axis, y-axis, and you have to label it. And then you have to label the whole graph using your student name and target behavior. For example, in this graph, the label of this graph is Jerry's social interaction initiation. So this person's target behavior can be the title of this graph. And you must include the line to distinguish two phases, baseline and intervention. And you also need to label each phase. Baseline and intervention with your actual intervention name. So for example, in this graph, I use verbal prompts as my intervention strategy. So the intervention phase was labeled as verbal prompts. So this is the example graph. Now I'll explain to you how to use Excel to graph an A-B design.